the gold.
Get your ass inside!
We are talking Night of the Tommyknockers, also known as simply Tommyknockers. Now, I have to be honest, I thought Tommyknockers were a creature purely based up from Stephen King's mind, from his kind of story, Tommyknockers. But apparently no, apparently they're an existing folklore creature, so who knew? Anyway, so this one is directed by Michael Sue and stars Richard Grieco, Tom Sizemore and Robert Asardo, and is a horror western. Now it follows a gang of outlaws, bank robbers called the Dirks Gang, who is headed up by Richard Grieco's character. And at the beginning of the movie we see that they're kind of doing a bank robbery, kind of getting away with money, but they do kill people. They're not like gentlemen or anything like that. They do kind of kill people, and this kind of it makes them have a variety of kind of people that are after them, etc. And they get wind that there might be this kind of bank in this particular kind of town that is storing gold. So they decide that they're going to go to this town. However, this town may well have gold in its vaults in the bank, but it also has these Tommyknockers that were disturbed whilst whilst kind of mining for this gold, and are now attacking this town and basically laying under siege. So we essentially have a situation where the outlaws have to kind of join forces with the remaining townsfolk to defend the small western town against wave after wave of deadly Tommyknockers. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss what do we think works in this movie. So it's always quite nice to see a mixing of genres, a western horror. There has been a few, admittedly, so it isn't necessarily something new, but I do kind of quite like seeing, horror movies take place in kind of different time periods and different kind of settings. It always gives it I think a certain new flavour, and that's quite good. I have to say, I quite liked Richard Grieco as this kind of leader of this kind of band of outlaws. It's somewhat of an understated performance. Maybe it's because he wants to kind of give this cool waters or still waters run deep, whatever the saying is, or it could be that he simply is turning up for a paycheck and isn't kind of over emoting too much. Who knows? But whatever the reason, I thought he was okay as this kind of somewhat kind of restrained leader of this gang, whilst the rest of the gang seemed to be a bit more dangerous and kind of unpredictable. So I quite like that. The actual Tommyknockers themselves, I actually kind of quite like the design of the kind of the prosthetics and stuff. They kind of look a little bit like the creatures from The Descent. And we do see quite a lot of them, and there is a lot of action. There seems to be a lot of these things. And there's, once we get into this kind of town, there is a variety of attacks and different kind of massacres that these things kind of put upon these townsfolk and these outlaws alike, which I thought was, so it is quite kind of fast paced in regards to the action. I also quite like when they're introduced to a number of other kind of potential kind of forces as well. We have a bounty hunter, we have this guy who wants revenge for the death of his brother caused by the outlaws, kind of turning up and stuff as well, along with the kind of the law and all that in the beginning of the movie. So we have a variety of different kind of obstacles to kind of overcome for our kind of group of protagonists. So that was all pretty good. And I've got to say, this kind of location that they're shooting in, we do kind of see quite a lot of the kind of this sort of western town. I suspect it might be some pre-existing Old West kind of theme attraction or something along the lines of that. But it looks pretty decent. I'm sure there's a few of these kind of dotted around America and stuff like that. So but I think it does a good job of kind of giving this kind of different kind of buildings, different kind of locations that are in this kind of town, which I thought was quite good. And to go with that, the costuming as well, all kind of quite fun and stuff like that. We've got the kind of the prostitutes and the kind of the outlaws and the bank tellers. Fairly good all costuming and stuff like that. Okay, so what doesn't work in this movie? So this movie's main issue for me is the acting outside of one or two actors is quite poor. And some of them is downright excruciatingly bad. So, you know, the batting average on the acting here isn't particularly good outside of, as I say, of maybe a couple of actors. Some of these kind of, the reactions to things that happen on screen, you know, the reaction to someone getting killed or a monster, it's quite bad, to be honest with you. So the acting here is unfortunately pretty distracting at times. So that's maybe the main issue, I think, for me, because it kind of feels like this movie was somewhat of a rushed production in regards to, you know, not many kind of takes and things like this. So it was like, yeah, one and done, move on to kind of the next scene. And then the acting here, there wasn't much kind of quality control by the director here, and the actors, and at least some of them, you know, were okay, but the majority, I think, were, you know, less than good. Let me just kind of put it like that. I think the cinematography of this movie is a little on the weaker side. These kind of creatures, they're somewhat kind of overlit at times, which kind of gives you the impression they are clearly just men in suits, and we know that. It's a low budget movie, but when you don't have a huge budget and you're kind of having to kind of like, you know, work around that, one option you could have maybe is to kind of shroud your kind of creatures in a little bit more shadow and things like that, and keep them out the kind of the light and stuff, and to try and, you know, give them a little bit more kind of mystery and menace, but also it doesn't kind of shine a light on the actual fact that they're, when you see them in kind of, you know, bright light there, obviously it kind of shows up some of the flaws. Now I actually quite like the actual makeup and stuff, and the actual creature designs. I actually do think they were okay, especially for the budget of this movie was kind of quite good. But, you know, it kind of looks fake, I think, because of the cinematography here. I think one of the other issues as well, as much as I thought the costuming and stuff was all quite good, everyone kind of looks a little bit sort of too clean and things like this. It doesn't look quite as grubby as I would have liked to have seen in a kind of a Western sort of environment. Everyone looks like they're wearing costumes rather than kind of, you know, real clothes. I mean, there's a good attempt to have, you know, the costumes look of the time, but they just look like, you know, new kind of costumes rather than kind of like dirtied clothes that characters have been wearing for kind of days on the road and things like that. So again, it adds to that kind of low budget kind of film. The story itself is a mix between kind of Night of the Living Dead and Assault on Precinct 13. It's kind of nothing to write home about, to be honest. Some of the characters are somewhat kind of broad, as you'd probably expect in a kind of a low budget kind of movie. I didn't necessarily think we got a, you know, particularly kind of good character work here. I don't think you're really expecting that, to be honest with you, with a movie called Night of the Tommyknockers. It was a horror western, but, you know, it kind of feels like they haven't put much depth in it. I mean, again, I'm not necessarily expecting anything too grandiose in a kind of a movie like this, but it just feels like somewhat of a kind of quick production because of that. And that's kind of the main issue here with the acting, the kind of just the quickness of this shoot and how it kind of comes across on kind of screen. It still is, I have to say, a somewhat entertaining movie. I quite like the kind of the action. I quite like the fact that we have multiple antagonists. I do enjoy these kind of creatures, and I kind of quite like Richard Grieco's character, along with maybe one or two others as well, which I thought were okay. But the bulk of the acting, unfortunately, is on the kind of the poorer side, and I really don't think they helped with you know, a somewhat kind of generic script and somewhat kind of lackluster technical elements as well. So overall, I think this movie is probably about a 4 out of 10 for me. It's a watchable film. I think it's a bit of fun, but it's nothing too deep. It's nothing too kind of like memorable. I don't think it kind of carves out a kind of classic kind of moment. There's no real big moment. I think, well, that was cool. It just feels somewhat kind of lackluster, but not terrible, especially if you are a B-movie aficionado. So it's a 4 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.